And welcome to another episode of 50 Shades in Grey, where today I am joined by mental health specialist from the process, Asa Sanderson. Asa, hello mate, how are you doing?
Hi there, Elliot. Yeah, great to see you again. Doing well, thanks.
Thank you for joining me, mate. What I'm going to dive straight in, what I wanted to speak to you about today is men's mental health, because over the last decade, there's obviously been a greater awareness of that. I know that's how you started out in men's mental health, and also you've dealt with women as well. What have you found to be the main differences between a male and female perspective on just dealing with issues and problems?
Yeah, really great question, Elliot. Great start to the podcast as well. The main things for me are that generally, if women are experiencing mental health challenges, then they seem to be a lot more open to seeking help, whether that be through one-to-one therapy or kind of a group, or going out and doing something to change their situation. You know, they're a bit more proactive in that sense, in my experience, whereas guys tend to be the opposite, really. You know, with the people that I've worked with, they tend to isolate a little bit more, quite reluctant to come into therapy, quite reluctant to talk about the problems, very reluctant to go to a group therapy session and talk about these things with other people that are struggling with similar issues. And then with that kind of withdrawal and that isolation normally comes some kind of accessory behaviors that are generally quite negative for their physical and mental health. So, say for example, things like drinking a little bit more, or maybe taking something, those kind of things.
When guys come in to your practice, do you find that the problems that once they share their problems, they're much more sort of like car crash problems than smaller things, or is it lots and lots of things that have built up over time?
Yeah, I think it normally is lots of things that have built up over time, you know, an accumulation of issues over, say, 10, 15 years, but they won't necessarily come in for those smaller issues, you know, those stepping stones on the way towards a much bigger issue. And they'll kind of tend to wait until they have that really big crash or that really big issue, say, for example, a relationship breakdown, or, you know, a job really quite severe depression or anxiety, before they actually reach out and ask for help.
So what normally would be, I mean, obviously they're all different, but what normally would be the process in getting back to getting through their problems? Is it group therapy, or is it sort of slow steps?
Yeah, so maybe before I answer that question, I'll just say kind of the key reasons that people come into therapy, because there's normally one of three things that I've experienced. You know, pretty much all my clients come in with either challenges in their relationship, or maybe even finding a relationship, and difficulties at work, or kind of getting a job, or keeping a job, or making the progress in their career that they might have liked to. And the third thing is kind of social issues. So, you know, interacting with people, making new friends, you know, engaging with other people. So they're the kind of reasons why people tend to reach out and seek therapy in the first place. And once they've done that, yeah, the steps that I kind of, in my practice, I always start with a really solid base of kind of making sure the diet's correct, making sure the diet's really as good as it can be, making sure the sleep's really good, and making sure that the client's exercising quite regularly. I find that with that solid base, with that really core base, then you can start working up from there and building a person that is quite engaged, quite sociable, has a range of hobbies and these kind of things, which we may come on to talking about later. But yeah, I always start with that base, make sure that's where it needs to be, and then build on that.
I was quite surprised by the first one that you mentioned there about not being able to get a relationship. Do you find that men find it harder to be happy single than maybe women would do?
Yes. Really great question, actually. From what I've seen, you know, of women, you know, in their mental health, generally, and also you see a lot of things on social media and things like that now about, you know, how women are so empowered and confident and enjoy being, you know, alone, right? They really seem to embrace that, and really take on that mantra. Whereas, you know, with guys, yeah, I haven't met many guys that are super happy to be, voluntarily single. I don't see that very often, but you do see it quite often with women, I find.
Do you think that's a dependence thing in terms of that they've got their role that they assume sort of like, and a lot of the time that is going out and being the breadwinner, but having someone there to sort of comfort them when they get home and not pamper, but to do all those jobs that maybe they don't want to do themselves because they're out working?
Yeah, I think that from the men's point of view, if a guy hasn't got a relationship, but all his friends have, so say, for example, middle-aged guy, 35, 45 years old, whatever it might be, most of that person's friends are probably going to be either married or in a
Yeah.
relationship, probably going to have kids, and probably going to be working full time, right? So therefore, they're going to be really busy, right? And they're going to be they're going to be quite full on. If you're a single guy at that age and all your friends are kind of following that lifestyle where you're married and so on, have kids, then that's quite isolating, isn't it? And there's not many people that are going to be that age, many guys that are going to be that age that they can just easily meet up with, hang out with, do a hobby with, play some sport, whatever. And so it's quite isolating just in that respect. And then as far as women are concerned, I think that women are a lot more social, kind of in general. That's what I've seen, is that say a female is kind of experiencing being single, they're much more likely to say go to a group exercise class, say a spin class, something like that. Much more likely to jump on a yoga class, Pilates, whatever it might be. Meet up with a few girlfriends, and traditionally, say for example they have kids, then obviously not all the time, but a lot of the time, the mother might stay home and look at the kids, right? Look after the kids, whereas the guy might be working. So that the female's friends might be more available to meet up for like a coffee during the day and a chat or a walk or whatever it might be. Whereas, if you're a guy and you're single, maybe much harder to do that.
So my next question is based upon the recent experience. We did a little couple of mini series of where I put together three women that had never met each other before, and we followed their dating journey as it was, so that people could see what it was like to be a middle-aged single woman in midlife trying to date. So started this WhatsApp group, never met each other before, these three women, and I introduced them all, and the level of empathy that was almost immediate within in both groups, I was really surprised by, because I'd set up the group, so I was obviously getting all these messages coming through, and I was reading them, and within a week they were sharing quite intimate stuff with each other that compared to say a group chat of my football group chat the guys that I've known for ages and ages and play football with, it's like you daren't show any weakness on there whatsoever, because you'll just never hear the end of it. Is that empathy a big part of it with males and females?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can't speak too much for women because obviously, I haven't been kind of in an all female group, right, and seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
But certainly the impression that I get is that women are much more willing and open to talk about their kind of vulnerabilities and things that maybe they need to talk through, things they're struggling with, and so on. Whereas with guys, I think there is a bit of an expectation that we present ourselves amongst our other guy friends in a way that we're successful, we're doing well in work, we're doing well in our relationships or our dating life, sports, things like that. So I guess what I'm saying is that with guys, there tends to be a bit more of a pressure to put on a front.
It's more of an alpha male sort of role that most guys seem to think they need to take on.
Yeah, I think so. And also, if you think about your friends or my friends, if you think about how many times there's been where you've met any of your friends in a group or a one-to-one situation, and they've said, "Yeah, actually, Elliot, I'm really struggling at the moment. I'm a bit overwhelmed, or I'm feeling really anxious, and work's really making it doesn't happen, does it? It's never happened to. I don't think it's ever happened to me, and I'm a therapist, right? And probably doesn't happen to you.
No, I think sort of you get to those conversations usually when you're in a one-to-one situation, and it's probably at the end of a night after people have relaxed and had a few drinks, and then they let their guard down and they gradually open up, as opposed to just, reaching out for help as it was.
Yeah, really, really good point. And personally, I find that a little bit annoying, really. That it takes for a mate to be as drunk as they can possibly be, right at the end of the night, to go, oh, actually to open up and talk through things. Because like you're not going to get any quality out of that kind of conversation, right? It's like 1 a.m. You've
Yeah.
had heaps of drinks. There's no quality to that conversation at all, but they choose that moment to actually be confident enough to open up and share. Whereas, if you were to just go for a coffee or just go for one drink at the pub, whatever, and be like, hey, buddy, yeah, I'm really struggling at the moment. Can we talk through it? Then you'd actually achieve something, right?
I definitely think so. Yeah, I think there are sort of there are times and there different relationships that you have with people, and different friendships as well. And almost sometimes it's a lot easier, I found, to talk to friends that you've not known that long, as opposed to friends that you've known for ages. And I don't know why that is.
No, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? It's a really interesting one. Maybe it's because, with your friends, that you've had for a long time, they have a certain expectation of you, and you're kind of trying to meet that expectation and carry out the identity that they expect you to have, which might be, successful, funny, strong, whatever, witty,
Yeah, I'm
whatever.
none of those.
Your
I
friends
got
will be
no,
watching, they'll be like, no, we definitely don't
yeah,
expect
yeah.
that.
But he's crossing all those off if you said them. Yeah, he's got none of those.
But yeah, with someone new, they don't really don't have any expectation, do they? So you're kind of forming a brand new relationship, and now our age, probably a bit more mature and a bit more kind of open to talking about those things. Whereas when you met your kind of football WhatsApp group friends, maybe you're a bit younger and so on, so
Yeah.
less likely to open up.
So, in terms of how things have played out it's massively changed. Like the roles of the male and the female. There's far more equality in terms of pay. I mean, there's a long way to go. Don't get me wrong, but women are far more self-sufficient now, as it were, so that they can make decisions that are good for them because they're not reliant on a breadwinner anymore, as it were. Do you think that men have struggled with that role change more than women have struggled with that role change?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the reality is that the man's role has changed quite a lot in a lot of relationships and probably in dating as well. So I think for women, great that they've kind of they're becoming more and more empowered all the time, and there is more equality, than there used to be. That's fantastic. So I think they've probably embraced that, haven't they? And I imagine you would find that women are generally happier now than they were 50 years ago because things are more equal and heaps more opportunities and so on. With guys, how they adapt to that. Yeah, I think it's pretty difficult to be a guy these days. It's certainly not as easy as it used to be, is it? Because there has been such a significant change, and the world around us with social media and things like that is changing so much all the time that I think it can be quite difficult to be a guy in 2025. I don't know what you think, but yeah, I think so.
Yeah, what amazed me that I read into the other day was that 75 to 80% of male deaths are accountable by suicide, which I thought was a staggering figure that I found quite difficult to believe. And there didn't really seem to be any concrete answers to why that figure was so much higher than it was for women. I read a couple of things. That one, that males are a lot less fearsome of death maybe than women are, so they find that as a far easier way out. But from my experience, women's pain threshold is far greater than a man's is. So I don't know how much sort of truth there is in that theory. Have you got any theories yourself of why that figure is so high?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, the main thing is that women like to talk about their problems. They really quite embrace that, whereas guys, absolutely don't talk about their problems, right? That's the main thing that I've seen. And probably the other thing I'd say is the social interaction aspect as well. This podcast predominantly is about kind of midlife, men's issues in midlife, right? Women tend to make more friends as they go through their life, from what I've seen, right? Whereas men just become more and more and more isolated. And also in terms of hobbies and activities, men do less and less and less, and much less likely to try new things than women are. So, I always think if you look at, say, a guy who's like 75 years old walking down the street, and, the typical kind of grumpy old man thing, right? I always think, how did he become so grumpy? I bet he wasn't that grumpy in his 25 when he was 25 and 30, right? How did that happen? And I think, well, probably social isolation, a lot of resentment, maybe about their relationship or how that went, and a lack of hobbies and activities. So a lot of the things that I work on with guys are those aspects.
I was laughing to myself because when I was younger, I used to have one of those paper rounds, like the midweek papers that were free, and used to go and deliver them. I say go and deliver them. A lot of the time, we used to just dump them over the tank traps, but that's another story. Occasionally, when I actually went out and delivered them, there used to be these signs on like sort of the older guys' houses that said like no free papers, no
Yeah,
free leaflets, and you used to think, oh, you grumpy old git.
yeah, yeah,
And I found myself the other day considering to actually put, because I'm so fed up with opening my post box and finding all these freebie leaflets.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I found myself moaning about it. And I
yeah,
was
yeah,
thinking, like, if I spent 8 seconds every day doing this is going to account for 2 months of my life putting crap
yeah,
in a bin that I
yeah.
don't want to be in. I thought, oh my God, I'm actually becoming like those guys are.
That's it. That's it. Exactly. Right. So how does that happen? How do we end up that way? And I think when you're younger, you're probably too busy having a good time and having a laugh and, playing sport or whatever it might be. And yeah, as you get older, those things fall away and all those gripes start to kick in, don't they? So I really think it's, I do like to think that I'm quite good at kind of trying to stay young at heart, right? I kind of pride
Yeah.
myself on that a little. And yeah, I think that's a really important part of aging. As we get older, trying to avoid all those gripes and trying to not to let those grind us down, and try and look on the lighter side of life. And yeah, stay positive, because it's a real habit, isn't it? Moaning a lot and things like that. It's a really bad habit.
Yeah, definitely. I think also that when you're younger, they're jobs that you don't have to do. So you don't worry about them because you're not doing it. It's like paying the electric bill. You're not doing it when you're younger.
Yeah,
So, you'll leave every light on in the house. But once you
yeah,
actually
yeah.
start paying your bills, you're running around turning everything off.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's it. So more responsibility, and actually that feeds into relationships a little bit, doesn't it? Because you think, let's say for example, the typical model is that the mum might stay at home and look after the kids, right? Whereas the guy's going out to work, and I know that's not the case in every situation, and quite stereotyped, but it probably is a more common situation. But if that's the case, the guy's going out and working long hours and so on, and then, the money's kind of being spent and so on, you don't often see the male being really lavish and spending the money so much. Whereas, I'm not saying it does happen, but it could happen that, the other person in the relationship might be a bit more spendy, let's say, and then that starts to become a bit of a resentment, and that starts to get annoying, and then so it's all these little things that just start to wear away at the guy, and then little by little they become that grumpy old man that's like we talked about, throwing away, putting the sign on the door about the leaflets.
So another thing, I've just realised what you said. I'm not going to do it, but it does wind me up though. I don't want these leaflets. I don't want to spend my time throwing them away. Just put them straight in my bin for me. That would help me out.
Well, there is that. There is that.
So the next thing and the last thing I wanted to talk about, Asa, because I've had a couple of conversations about this. Is this term midlife crisis? It's, I'm firmly in midlife now, and I hear sort of like mostly women talking about it's always related to guys. I've never heard anyone saying she's going through a midlife crisis, but a guy will go out and suddenly buy himself like a Ferrari or Harley Davidson, and it's like he's going through a midlife crisis. What is your personal interpretation of, do you think this is a thing? Because I've got my own interpretation of it. What's yours?
Yeah. So for me, I think it could be midlife. It could be younger than that. I mean, what is midlife anyway? But you know, I think we can all have a crisis at any given time, right? For me, I was about 33 when I had a so-called crisis. When the wheels started to come off, and I thought something serious has got to change here, right? But generally, like in my 20s, I wasn't particularly, I didn't enjoy that period, right? Whereas actually for me now, in my years now, I'm actually like really, really happy and couldn't be happier, which you'd probably say is like midlife. So I think it can happen at any time where you have this moment where you just think, my life's got to change, right? I've got to do something drastic. I've got to change something, and so on, so on. It doesn't have to be in midlife. I think it's just most common that it is at that age, which would probably be what, between 40 and 60. And there's probably a number of reasons for that. So, for example, you have become socially isolated. Maybe the relationship is breaking down. Maybe the career hasn't been as successful as you'd hoped. Maybe financially you're not stable as you might have hoped, and so on. And so typically maybe it is that midlife, 40 to 60 years old. Also, there's the concept of the menopause, which is a very real thing where, physically we start to change, whether it be adding more weight, losing muscle, the hormones of the body change, and things like that. So heaps of reasons why it might be in midlife, but I don't think it has to be. I think, guys and women can go through a crisis at any given time, and it's just really important to know what to do when those kind of hard times hit.
See, so here's my take on it, because I've heard this a few times. We'll take the stereotypical sort of like midlife crisis of like, so a guy's finished his relationship or come out of a relationship, and then he suddenly started, people say he's dating younger women and he's bought himself a Ferrari. He's going through a midlife crisis. And I've always thought, where's the crisis? He sounds like he suddenly realised that he needs to start enjoying his life, because and I think it's almost like a midlife awakening sometimes, that you get to this point, and this is only my theory, no one else is going to agree with me, but you get to a point in life where you're getting up, you're going to work, you're brushing your teeth. And I've said this a few times of like, your days, you'll get to a point in your day where you think, I feel like I'm doing this all the time. And you get to a point of where you think, what is this about? Why, like, what are we doing here in the first place? If I'm going to spend, 80% of my life working, the other 20%, I've got to start enjoying it, because it's got to be worth something. And I think sometimes people go through an awakening, and that might be based around an event in their life that kicks them into that. And then why shouldn't they suddenly go out and buy something that they wanted when they was a kid, or, give up their job, travel around the world? It doesn't have to be a crisis. I think sometimes that men and women just, think, I'm going to do something for me. For women, for example, I've raised all my kids up to this age. I'm going to go out and I'm going to have an absolutely mental 2 years where I'm going to date people far too young for me, or maybe they're not too young for me, and enjoy myself.
Yeah, so I really like what you said there about an awakening. This kind of term, midlife crisis, it just sounds quite shamey in itself,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Whereas awakening sounds much better. And also, really like what you said about how we kind of go through life thinking, God, is this it? For a lot of people, it'll be a 9 till 5 or an 8 till 5, Monday to Friday job, sat at a desk, earning an okay wage, probably not amazing, and a lot of that money is probably going into the mortgage, and just doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, that's not a lot of fun, but that's what we have almost been trained and taught to do, right? You speak to your mum and dad when you're, growing up, or you just see what they're doing. That's what they did. So you just do what they did. You go to school and you're taught, get a job, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. That's what you do. Not so much the younger generation now, but that's what we were taught, right? Like to think outside the box. You just wouldn't do that. And so, yeah, I think absolutely you might get to an age, for me, like I said, it was about 33, maybe 40, maybe 50, whatever. And you start to question things, right? And you go, what am I doing? Like, what am
Yeah.
I doing? And for a lot of guys, what they are doing is that Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, social isolation, no hobbies and interests, bored out their mind, potentially in a relationship that they don't particularly enjoy. So yeah, absolutely. Why not have an awakening and start doing things that you really want to do? And a lot of kind of what I work on is drilling down into what do you actually want to do, right? And what would be fun for you? Like you think when you're at school, right? We used to have playtime.
Yeah.
Then you get a job. There's no playtime anymore. You just eat your lunch and go back to work. Well, what would you do if you did have playtime? What would you do with that time? What do you do for fun, right? And that's a question that I ask clients quite often. What do you do for fun? And 9 times out of 10, there's no answer. Watch Netflix. I don't really know. There's nothing there. So a lot of the work that we do is around those hobbies and interests and actually starting new things.
I totally agree with you. I think for me, it's more of a case now. I mean, I have a great time when I'm not at work. I really do. And it's understanding that trade-off, because I was talking today, fun enough, at someone to work, and I said, I've become more aware in the last couple of years maybe that I feel like I'm wishing time away to get to my fun bits. Like I want to get through the week, and I do like my job, but I want to get through my week so I can get to the fun bits or to the holiday or the next bit. But I find myself now realizing, probably because I'm older, and there becomes a more value of time, because you start to be aware of, right, I'm getting closer to the end than I am the beginning. I've got to the top of the mountain, and the only way I'm going down now. So
Yeah.
there's a value to time, and I find that I'm getting annoyed that I'm now wishing time away to sort of get to those fun parts. But you think, okay, what's the trade-off? Like, if I don't do any of this, I can't have a quality of life where I can do any fun things, because I'm going to be the guy, sitting outside Sainsbury's and trying to get some money. And you don't want that quality of life either.
Yeah, so that's the thing, isn't it? People kind of get a little bit locked in because you have the mortgage, you might have the kids as well, and you've trained to do the job that you're doing. I mean, if I think about the degree I did, my first degree, it's a complete waste of time, right? And if I'd stayed in that career, then I would have been that miserable older guy, right? And so, fortunately for me, I made a significant change, and yeah, like designed a life that I really love, and it worked out pretty well. But a lot of people can't do that, right? So then where'd you go from there? You kind of, I know plenty of people that are very much locked in. And so maybe then it becomes even more important that you do get that social interaction and you do get that playtime and you do have those hobbies and interests. Because otherwise you're probably going to end up that grumpy old man, walking down the street moaning about things.
I mean, I'm a very sort of light-hearted person anyway, and I'll try to have fun. Sometimes I get in too much trouble at it for work for, trying to get fun at every moment possible to make the day enjoyable. But for guys that are in that rut that can start to become, leading to depression and leading to sort of more mental health issues, what would be your advice to them where they're getting to that point of where, they are starting to think about, I'm kind of done with this?
Yeah. So, for me, and I've mentioned it quite a lot already on this pod, but social interaction and hobbies and interests, that's really the key. A lot of people come to me and they say, oh, I need a relationship because I'm so miserable. And I'm thinking, if you get a relationship now whilst you're so miserable, what's the partner going to be like? You know, probably a bit miserable as well, I imagine. So, it's about, it sounds like a cliche, but becoming the best version of yourself, right? In as many different ways you can, whether it be financially, whether it be career wise, whether it be hobbies, social interaction, and so on. The problem is that when you're in that low place, like, stuck in a job, financial responsibility, overwhelmed, so on, and you're just in that churn of 9 to 5 and bored and so on, it's almost impossible to see what you need to do, and even harder to then take action to do what you need to do, right? But for me, and if people do reach out and they do start therapy, whether it be with me or whoever, hopefully they'll be working on building a social network, being a part of a community, having a purpose, and taking up hobbies and interests, right? And if you get these different things in place, then maybe the cherry on the cake is to have a relationship once you have those things in place. It was exactly the same for me. When I mentioned earlier about being 33 and kind of having this kind of awakening moment or crisis, whatever you want to call it, the fact is, I hadn't made a new friend in about 10 years. I was doing a job I hated. My hobby was going to the gym on my own with my headphones in, doing the same workout I'd done for 10 years. That's not a hobby. That's punishment, right? So, and actually it is quite self-harming in a way, because you just, many reasons, but that's another story. But the point is that I used to walk past a tennis club and it would be packed with people having fun of all ages and having a great time, right? And I used to think, I wish I was doing that. And I never thought to join, right? And then one day I joined the tennis club. Why not? Let's give it a go. And literally it changed my life, right? It might sound like a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
I was joining a tennis club, changed my life. But actually it gave me a lot of social interaction, because you can't play on your own. And when I first started playing, I was playing with 70-year-olds, right? Just to learn. But it gave me social interaction, gave me a community, gave me a purpose, learning as well, learning something that we haven't talked about. But as people get older, they generally stop learning, right? I have a tennis lesson every week, at least one, sometimes 3. So, I'm learning a new thing all the time. And yeah, all of a sudden, all these things that make you happy, all these levers that you can pull on to release dopamine and make you happy, start to come together. And all of a sudden, you're not depressed anymore, right? Yeah, for me, just the short answer to your question is hobbies and interests, social interaction. If you can nail those 2 things, you're probably going to start feeling better.
Yeah, but thank you, Asa. Listen, because we are coming to the end, but guys, if you are in that place where it seems like, stopping everything is an easy out, I can assure you it's not, because it is probably for you, but the effects of that are far reaching beyond anything that you would be able to see, to your partner, your kids, relationships, the relationships that they will then have with their own kids. It's a huge ripple effect of one person going into that. So if you are in that dark place at the moment where you can't see a way up, speak to someone. Like I said, contact someone like Asa, contact Asa, where you can actually talk about it and, at least have a conversation before you make any drastic decisions. But Asa, thank you so much for joining me. Really enjoyed it.
Real pleasure, Elliot. Just to add to what you were saying at the end there, if there is anyone out there that's really struggling, there's heaps and heaps of free kind of helplines, and groups as well. Lots of men's mental health groups where people can just join for absolutely free. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to pick up the phone and make that call, but, it really can change people's lives, right? It just takes that little bit of courage, and yeah, you can change your life. Absolutely can. So yeah, that would be my advice as well. Just Google some of these free helplines or free groups, and that will.
Yeah, definitely. And not for you, but for the people around you, especially if you've got kids, I would implore you to do it. But again, Asa, thank you for joining me. Guys, thank you for joining Fish Chasing Grey. Make sure you subscribe and follow, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Goodbye.